Hi, welcome to the Shepherd's Rest Dog Talk. This is episode 49A.
I'm Cam and this is Julie.
Yes.
Today's Torah portion is Numbers 8 through 12, all the chapters. And it is a whole lot. Yeah, covering 5 chapters makes it pretty much impossible to touch on all the things that we could touch on.
Well, in 15 minutes, yeah.
Exactly, in 15 minutes. I need like a week. So, Chapter 8 talks about the inauguration of the Levites. I wanted to start there. It begins with this odd just kind of placement of, and the lamp. For Aaron, how he's going to keep the light of lamps. Remember that the menorah has 7 branches. The center one a little bit higher as a servant branch, and then there's 3 on each side. The center one goes straight up, and the other 3 on each side point actually towards the lamp. So it said that as they're all burning, it looks like one large light.
Oh, cool.
Well, if you think about it, what he says in Matthew, that you have a light, you don't put it under the bushel, right? Let your light shine so they may see. Okay, well, those 3 on each side, their light shining into that center one is what even creates a brighter light. The significance of starting chapter 8 with this is because we see in Exodus that all the people brought the light, the oil, so that the light could be burned. Then the next thing we see are the Levites. And see, the Levites, remember, they take on the responsibility or the proxy for the firstborn of Israel. Because after the sin of the golden calf, the firstborn of all Israel no longer had the privilege of being the king and priest of their family. They now had to have that relegated to the Levites, who did that for us. Now the Levites are set apart. Here's what's neat. You have the priest, right? Then you have the Levites, and then you have Israel. Mm-hmm. They're kind of the go-between. When they're inaugurated, it's different than when the priests were inaugurated in Leviticus. See, in Leviticus 8 and 9, where they're being dedicated, it's only Moshe and the priests who are involved in that. But now with the Levites, all of Israel comes and puts their hands on the Levites. It's kind of like they can't get too close, but as close as they can get, they're putting it's the idea of a representative. They're putting their power onto the Levites, the representative. So now they can go in proxy, just like they did for firstborn, but also acting, I guess, as we live vicariously through them.
Yeah.
Okay, or being able to enter into the holy place and being in. Not a holy place, but being able to go into the tabernacle is through the Levites. They're the ones that get, they have service. That's their job, okay?
Right.
Their job is to help the priest. The Israelites' job is to help the Levites help the priest. If the Israelites aren't doing their jobs, each of the tribes, remember they have a job, if they don't do their jobs, then the Levites can't do theirs. And if they don't do theirs, then you have the priests who can't do theirs. And if they can't do theirs, then you have the Lord going, I'm sorry, I'm not able to fulfill this because it was an agreement and you can't keep your end, and therefore I'm not going to. He's going to keep his. Part of his keeping his end is saying, if you guys don't do that, then I'm going to just hold up until you do. That is a part of him being faithful to that covenant. We see in Numbers 8:24 that the Levites between ages 25 and 50 are the ones who perform the service. However, we've read previously that it said ages 30 to 50. The sages say that the discrepancy in age has to do with there's the 5 years of apprenticeship. They don't actually have a job yet, but they're learning. They're kind of doing the hospital rotation. They're doing an ER.
Internship.
Right, yeah, the surgery, the floor, they're doing it all. And then they will be given their, allotment or job, their duty, once they hit 30. But we know from Deuteronomy that all of the Levites are considered teachers. So even after the age of 50, they may not serve directly in the tabernacle, but they still have a job of teaching the young ones and teaching the Israelites as well. Chapter 9, we move in and we see that there's the call to do the Passover once again. Now remember, this will be the second Passover. The first Passover was in Egypt.
Coming out of Egypt.
The second Passover will be here at Mount Sinai.
Oh, so it's just a year later.
Yes, this is only a year later. After Mount Sinai, there is not another Passover until we get the land. Now, part of this, we know that unless you're circumcised, you cannot participate in Passover. And if your children are not circumcised, then the parents can't participate. They were not circumcising in the wilderness.
Oh.
Which is interesting because then that makes me think, once again, proving you don't have to be circumcised before coming in. It's after coming in that you're circumcised of the heart, and also, if of the proper sex, circumcised of the flesh. But that, again, just like Abraham, circumcision was not required before. It was something that came after.
Right.
Sages say that one of the reasons why they did not circumcise in the wilderness had to do with the dangers of not knowing when you're going to have to travel, and also the dangers of just being in the wilderness with an open flesh.
Well, Yahweh says over and over, these laws are for when you go into the land.
Yes, right. And so what we see is right here, they didn't keep it except for twice and then going into the land. There is significance to the reason why there are 2 Passovers. Reading this week's Torah portion, you really start to see all the elements that are in Exodus 12 through 19. What we have is we have a Passover. We have the firstborn. We have the bones where a man can't take Passover, or because we have the bones idea. Well, remember in Exodus, they get Joseph's bones. We have a 3 days journey being requested. We have the Lord going before them when they leave Egypt, and here Lord goes before them in the ark. And we have the call, where the Lord calls them out of Egypt. And then here we also see in chapter 10, the trumpets. That's what calls them to move. We have all these elements, but in a different order. Oh, and we also have Jethro, right? And then where Jethro in Exodus 18, where he mentions to Moses he needs to share responsibilities, we have that again this week too, where in chapter 11, where we have Jethro suggested there again, and then we have him sharing, the Holy Spirit being shared with the men so that they share responsibility. All these things I just listed are things that happened at the Exodus and things that have happened in this week's Torah portion. The reason why those 2 things link up is because we basically have a second Exodus idea. We will have a future Exodus. We had the one from Egypt, and then the Lord brings them out and shows them for a year. Okay, you guys didn't know, but now you know, and here's what it should look like. Now let's go through the whole process, knowing what you know, knowing that he is a living God, because in Exodus 16, he talks about, I'm going to provide this food so you guys know that I'm God, that I love you and I want to take care of you. So for a whole year, he's done it. Now he presents them with every single challenge that they had before they left without the knowledge. Now with the knowledge, what's going to look different? It's a second time.
It's just like today.
Right. It's just like today, because there will be a second Exodus.
And we're already being presented with everything we need.
Yes.
Will you do it or not?
Right. And what will your reaction be? Will you groan and mumble in the wilderness that you don't have the food that you want because you don't feel like obeying? Because that's basically what they're saying there. Their whole thing is like, look, in Exodus, when they complained, 16, the Lord provides because he's like, oh, yeah, well, I bet you guys are pretty concerned. He gave them quail in the evening and he gave manna in the morning. Now, how long that lasted for the whole year, I don't know. But when we get here into chapter 11, what we have is them saying, now they're just looking back at the things that they've had in Egypt. It's not just they just want meat and bread. Now they want the cucumbers, the leeks. They name specific things. Because the whole aggravation with them, they have food. They're being fed every single morning. The aggravation is we don't want to have to obey you to get the blessings. Isn't that right where we are today? We don't want to have to obey all the commandments, okay?
For the blessings.
For the blessings.
We should just get them.
Right, we should just get them because Yeshua did that.
Right.
So we're right back in that same wilderness. I would suggest we're right back in the same wilderness of the second just before they leave here. Because see, they asked Pharaoh for 3 days out in the wilderness. Now the Lord prepares them, and what he says, we're going to go for 3 days in the wilderness. And the Lord, the ark here in chapter 10 goes before them. It's the only time the ark goes before them. We know earlier in chapter 10, we first have the camp of Judah going. Then we have the 2 priests camp of Gershon and Merari. Then you have Reuben. Then you have the furnishings of the ark, right? Then you have Ephraim and Dan's camps. So we already know the order. The ark should be in the center because it's in the heart, right? It is the heart. Yet here we see in chapter 10 at the end of it going in front of them. And that's when Moses gives the whole, rise and let your enemies be scattered, okay? Because that's what happens when they're going to move. And on this one, the first time they're going to move for a 3-day journey is with the Lord in front of them. Well, first time they left Egypt for a 3-day journey, the Lord was ahead of them. So it's the same pattern. I'm telling you, it's the same pattern. Acts 7, we see Stephen telling a pattern of the first time and second time, first time, second time. They always got it the second time.
Right.
They missed it the first time. So I suggest that we are at the cusp of that second beginning, or preparing the hearts of, or whatever. But we're in the wilderness right now. And in the wilderness is when he said, look, I'm feeding you, I'm taking care of you, I'm doing this, but will you still trust in me? Because we see next week, all this, that 3-day journey, takes them right to where they need to be in order to go into the land.
We have a really cool pattern like that in the New Testament this week.
Oh, good. Of course we do. I would suggest that chapter 10 is hooking in with not just the trumpets as far as when to travel. These are 2 special trumpets that Moshe makes. Moses makes these silver trumpets from one piece, all right? And 1 blow called the leaders, 2 blows called the congregation, a certain way that they would, told them battle. I mean, told them all kinds of things. It's the voice of the Lord. If you didn't know the sound of the trumpet, you wouldn't know how to respond. It would not mean anything to you. Right. He taught them in the wilderness before he's going to make the call, what the calls sound like.
Yes.
And that was on Mount Sinai that they're being taught that. So I would suggest again, learning his voice right now is so important so we can recognize the call when it comes. When that trumpet, is it 1? Is it 2? Is it fast, a staccato? Is it slow, long? Which one is it? By knowing his voice, we'll recognize it. And you have to remember, when it talks about him moving, the camp moving and the Lord moving, it talks about when they travel, he'll actually hover a few days. So it's not like move now. It's more like you're going to move.
Ready.
And when you're getting ready to move, then through your learning and the Holy Spirit, you'll know now. But he didn't just say now.
Yeah,
but after a few days, they knew. It wasn't, does that make sense? It hovered. That means that people had to watch, be diligent, be alert.
Think of Hosea.
That's what I was thinking too.
Hosea.
There's the second day, and then the
right.
third
day is when it's done.
But they're watching because they're waiting to be healed that second day.
We know we're getting close. Vigilant. We know it's almost here.
Right. Absolutely. The Torah points to the things so that we can then see it in the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, to then realize with those 2 together exactly where we are again in the pattern that he's established for us to learn from and to allow the Holy Spirit to use as ammunition to enlighten us to what's around us.
Right.
Another great point that we see in this week's Torah portion having to do with maybe where we are today, and that is the mixed multitude. There's in chapter 11, there's the complaining that happens. Again, we had complaining in 16, but this complaining looks different. And it speaks of the mixed multitudes. And just before it speaks of the mixed multitudes, in 11:1, it says, and it came to be that when the people were as complainers, so they're not quite complaining yet. It's kind of that energy of disruption and discontent that starts. And again, if we don't take every thought captive and we're not thankful for all things, even if we're tired of the bread, be thankful for all things, this is what happens. We begin to look as complainers, okay? It says, it was evil in the ears of the Lord. Then the Lord heard it, and his displeasure burned, and a fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed those in the outskirts of the camps. The outskirts of the camps were the Gentiles who came into the camps, okay, were accepted in the camps, but they camped in the back of whatever tribe they were with. And in 2, it says, and the people cried out to Moses, and Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. And then in verse 4, it says, and the mixed multitudes who were in their midst lusted greatly. Now, we already know from Exodus that the stranger and the native are in the same. That's one. So here's what's interesting. He's talking about those who are mixed among them. This is the tares from Matthew 13. Basically, this is the tares. The mixed multitude who were in the midst of them greatly lusted. So the children of Israel also wept again and said, who is going to give us meat? They
Right.
didn't take captive their own thoughts, and they let the influence of those who aren't even really walking with him influence their reaction to the living God. That should have never happened.
This all lines up with the New Testament portion
Oh my
of this
gosh,
week.
that's the smile.
I mean, seriously, it all
we didn't talk about it. We
lines
didn't know
up.
that.
All lines up with the New Testament this week.
Awesome. I can't wait to hear it.
Yes.
So, again, there's a clue to where we are right now. We have a mixed multitudes, and we have a mixed multitudes within us. Right now is the body, and the Lord is weeding them out. There's so many other things this week that I wish I could talk about. Like back in Exodus, we had the golden calf idea. They had to drink it like the wife. Then we had this one where they're being burned. Just the mixed multitude are being burned out. Well, we know that from Leviticus 21 that we have the children of the priest, okay, who are whoring. They're burned by fire. We see that in Revelation. We have the drinking of the cup by the bride, and we have the children being burned. It is such a pattern. Again, the first chance and then the second chance. We had the first chance with Messiah, we talked about last week, when he drank the cup for us to come in. But you know what? Those who don't, at the end of Revelation, the second coming, it's going to be the burning. It's not, the drinking is over for so many. You know, it just, every generation gets a chance to go through this ability to be brought out of Egypt. Are we, our generation, willing to say yes to that? Will it look different? Because the last generation, we know in Psalm 78, there's that last generation that must know Torah.
Right.
Because I'm telling you, that's right here. When they come out, they're the last ones. They're going to get it right. Man, I hope that we're in that one, that we can get it right. We've got to learn the Torah in order to see who he really is, in order to truly be able to accept all of our responsibilities and privileges in a true exodus of coming out of the world.
So I hear Paul's words echoing. Will I make it to the end? You know,
Yes.
basically, will I be
Will I be that
found
last
worthy?
generation? Yes.
Will I be found worthy when he comes?
Well, I could go on and on and on and on, because literally I haven't even scratched the surface of the stuff that's in here.
True.
So you guys delve in, have a great time, really look for patterns, look for just, there's so much meat. Enjoy it. Have a snack. You'll have to snack throughout the week because it's too filling to take in one dose. Thank you for joining us this week. We hope that you enjoyed it. I know we sure did.
Yes.
We will see you on the flip side with the Brit Hadashah and Julie.
Shalom.